South Africa came to COP27 to advance a number of key messages. The first one being that we need secure maximum ambition in terms of climate action, and that the world needs to go beyond just merely talking about taking action on climate action and act. We also came here to call on our partners from developed economies to honor their previous commitments in order to provide support to developing economy countries like South Africa and a number of them in Southern Africa and other parts of the world. The third one was to build on progress made in Glasgow on the importance of just transitions, and also to advance discussions on the special needs and circumstances of countries in Africa. Now, our experience here in COP27 has been a good experience. We are encouraged by the call that was made by His Excellency President of Egypt, President Al-Sisi, that we need more action and more ambition in implementing all the climate action commitments. We also agree with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, that we can no longer afford any further delays in mitigating the effect of climate change. African countries are losing between 3 to 5% of their GDP due to the effects of climate change. There is consensus from across the board that just transitions must be just, and they must also be inclusive, which is particularly important for developing economy countries, which are the worst affected by climate change. Now, although Africa itself carries the least responsibility for climate change, the continent experiences much of its harshest effects, and this reality is not disputed. There is agreement that for transitions to be just, vulnerable workers and vulnerable communities need to be included in designing just solutions. The South African Cabinet recently endorsed our National Just Energy Transition Investment Plan as a basis for our pathway towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient society. And according to the plan, South Africa will need approximately $98 billion to correct an error that I made, not 98 trillion, but $98 billion over the next 5 years to enable a just transition and achieve the ambitious targets we set out in our nationally determined contribution. The plan includes a portfolio of investments across 3 priority sectors that have been identified, and they being the electricity sector, as well as the green hydrogen sector, which is a new sector for us, and the new energy vehicles sector, which is also a new sector. Now, the financing mechanisms, both from public finance institutions and commercial institutions, need to provide good concessional loans and be upweighted towards grants or non-debt instruments. And we have already communicated the structuring of the offer that they made to us at Glasgow, that we need to restructure and have more grants as already we can see that our investment plan requires much more money to be properly and fully implemented. And we therefore call for the reform of the multilateral development banks as well as international financing institutions and the mobilization of commercial banks to meet the climate financing needs that we have already identified and that many countries have already identified. At COP26 in Glasgow last year, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union offered support in the form of, as I said, the Just Energy Transition Partnership. It is our hope that this partnership will offer groundbreaking processes for funding by developed countries for the ambitious but necessary mitigation and adaptation goals of developing countries. Now, whilst we've been here, we've been holding a number of bilateral meetings aimed at consolidating common views on climate action, on just transitions, as well as on funding processes. So our meetings have been really beneficial, and we believe that it is only with substantial support that Africa can build the resilience that it is required to build to protect itself and safeguard our economies. It is only with significant additional funding that we can ensure that future generations of South Africans, and indeed Africa at large, live in an environment that is clean, conducive to health and well-being, and that has not been destroyed because of the inaction of today's leaders. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'll now open the floor to questions. Please introduce yourself and fire away. Any hands? There's a hand over there. Oh, there's a microphone just behind you.
Sorry. Darren Graham from BBC News. The deal last year from Glasgow was seen as an example of how rich countries can help developing ones, and many developed nations used it as an example. What's your take on that, and how much of the offer was a grant, how much was loans, and how much is other climate finance?
Mr. President?
The deal that was struck at COP26 in Glasgow was quite historic in the sense that following the various commitments that had been made in the past to make funding available, we were actually seeing real money that was being committed, which amounted to 8.5 billion US dollars. And the money was categorized into a variety of segments. As we looked more closely at it, we found that in the end only 2.7% was grant money, and other portions were concessional loans, and other portions were loans that would be offered by development funding institutions as well as your normal commercial institutions. As we were drafting our investment plan, we came up to the figure that will help fund our just transition over the next 5 years, and it amounted to about 98 billion US dollars, which would be about 1.5 trillion South African rands. Earlier I corrected myself, but this is the amount of money that will be required, and we have communicated this to our partners and have said that because South Africa already carries a fairly sizable loan burden, which it has to service from its fiscus, we require more grant funding. Now, fortunately, that message seems to have been well received to those we have spoken to, and yesterday in our bilaterals, we reiterated the need for grant funding to be upgraded, and we're hoping that our discussions will continue in that vein, where it consolidates a real partnership, a partnership that says we're here to give support, and in our case, largely because our continent only contributes 1% or so of the damage that's been caused to the climate, and we believe that the more industrialized countries and the countries that are more developed need to live up to the commitments that they have made, knowing fully well that they have, through the development of their own economies, contributed a great deal more to the damage that many countries on our continent now labor under. So we are continuing in our discussions with them, and because it was historic and it could well be the model around which other deals and partnerships are struck with other countries, it is something that we need to hold up as a model which can either be improved or scaled up when it comes to other places in the world. But it is a process through which we believe your more developed economies will begin to live up to some of the commitments that they have made. In the end, the transition that is going to require quite a lot of funding. Thank you.
Okay, we have two more questions. I'll take the lady in front.
Thank you so much. My name is Yenzu Mbuyisa. I'm from South Africa as well, so Sanbonani. Thank you so much for that talk as well. I just want to touch on a couple of points that you mentioned, particularly in your beginning of your talk about the 3 actions that South Africa wants to, aspires towards within the climate space, and that's committing to more actions and securing maximum ambitions towards the actions towards climate change. And you also wanted to call on our partner countries, especially developed nations, to offer us more support, and then building on the progress from Glasgow. And to this, I just want to understand a bit, maybe in terms of asking for support, how much is the governance or the presidency investing in forging collaborations between other countries, particularly those within Africa? Because I'm a climate student at the moment, and what we've noticed is that there is a significant lack of research done on the African continent, which makes it quite difficult when we approach developing nations asking them for assistance in any way, particularly because of the fact that they're not aware of our ecosystems and the special needs that you mentioned as well that the African continent has. So how is the presidency fostering more collaboration amongst nations, and how is it also building on the amount of knowledge systems and knowledge pools and the narrative of Africa and the climate sort of predicament that we face, because it's quite particular and unique compared to the rest of the world. Another thing, whilst I see Naledi up as well, in terms of research and investing within the research space, in universities and also at the high school level, is there any plan that South Africa has in making sure that people are more aware of what climate change actually is and what environmental implications there are for them as a people? And are you looking at building on that capacity? Because like I said, there's a significant lack of research and lack of knowledge just amongst people within South Africa, and I think that's our detriment. And we know that the biggest effort that we can put towards fighting climate change or mitigating and forcing adaptation is through changing people's perception, understanding how they contribute to the problem and how they can thus resolve it. So I just want to understand those 2 aspects. So it's collaboration and how much are we investing into education, not just at the senior level or the tertiary level, but also just for normal layman people who are, in my opinion, the most vulnerable people. What is the presidency and South Africa doing as a nation?
Thank you. Would like to give other colleagues a chance. The gentleman just behind you, please, with the mic.
Thank you so much. My name is Mark Tilley. I'm a journalist with Carbon Pulse. I'm just wondering if you could provide a bit more detail on the US plan to involve the private sector by giving them the opportunity to earn carbon credits as part of this initiative.
Okay, I'll take one more, and then the president can, the gentleman at the back, the president can then take all three as the last batch of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nick Masinski. I'm a professor at University of Maine. And my question is about what is South Africa's role within the African group of negotiators and their hope for bringing about consensus among African countries' strategy here at COP?
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. President?
Well, the first question from Ian Ziwembuiso is typically a student type of question that deals with research and things like that. I'm going to ask both ministers, Umama Barbara Creasy, no Mama Naledi Pando, whom you correctly call Mama, to answer both the questions that you have posed to them. But just